There's no denying we've reached an incredible era in gaming with sprawling open worlds and cinematic storytelling. But as more money gets poured into the industry and standards start to arise, there seems to be less games that ignite my imagination quite like they did in the 90s. This was an age of gaming where developers were boldly pushing boundaries and us players were happy guinea pigs for their experiments. New controls, new audiences, and a whole new dimension with the rise of 3D. And for us N64 owners, we were often the lucky recipients of some truly incredible games, even by today's standards. Take Rare, for example. They were on fire back then, churning out hits like Diddy Kong Racing, GoldenEye, and of course Perfect Dark at an almost breakneck pace. But amidst all these gems, there were a couple titles that stood out as a little different. Games that didn't really fit the mold. Jet Force Gemini was one of those games. As a kid, this game blew my mind. The sheer amount of exploration and interaction it offered was unlike anything I had ever seen. Even small things like an enemy throwing their weapon away and surrendering to you was absolutely incredible. I couldn't even believe that that level of complexity was even possible in a video game. My friends and I poured countless hours into the game, scouring every corner of the vibrant alien planets, rescuing those darn tribals. We were all convinced, absolutely certain, that a sequel was just around the corner. But we waited, and well, let's just say that we're still waiting. So what exactly happened to Jet Force Gemini? Hi everyone, my name is Otto, and welcome to Exits Examines. We'll be exploring the lives of people, products, and more after their prime time has seemingly come to an end. If that sounds good to you, there's a subscribe button below. From Ocarina of Time to Final Fantasy VII, the late 90s redefined what video games could be. During this incredibly influential period of gaming, Rare itself was also being inspired. Jet Force Gemini was born from this crucible, becoming a melting pot of influences, drawing from both vintage and also contemporary titles of the time. Years later, one of the lead designers said, "I initially wanted to make Mario with guns, which sounded a bit stupid, but also one of the huge influences was the Metroid series. Mario 64's freedom seemed to have fueled the game's open-world designs, while arcade shooters and Quake's tactics sculpted the combat. Super Metroid's DNA definitely shines through in the weapon collection and upgrade system." The lead artist said he pulled from, quote, all over the place, with elements of Star Wars, Aliens, Dune, and perhaps an especially large influence from Battle of the Planets, with the characters having a strong resemblance to the Jet Force team, both in design and general concept. In 1997, development started in earnest. Giving Rare status as one of the heavyweights delivering hits for the N64, they maintained a close relationship with Nintendo, and this relationship played a crucial role in Jet Force Gemini. One example of how this helped shape the game was when, after presenting an early build of the game to Shigeru Miyamoto, the team decided to alter the design of the main characters. The shift moved away from a cute, more childlike appearance to a more mature and realistic one because of concerns over a game starring two children killing and butchering a large number of creatures. Speaking of character design, this went way over my head as a kid, but all the character names came from constellations, and of course the titular Gemini is because the main characters are of course twins. Despite the N64 being on the market for a few years, developers were still adjusting to controllers, especially in regards to 3D games, and Jet Force Gemini was no exception. Paul Mountain, one of the directors of the game, explained that, quote, "The overriding aim was to create a system that was both fun and as easy to pick up and play as possible while retaining the variety of gameplay that we wanted. After many attempts to automate the change of view and targeting mode based on the context of action, we settled on a manual system with the targeting camera fixed behind the character's head, as we felt this delivered the best gameplay experience. It feels very old school to me, difficult, unforgiving, but ultimately precise." While precise may or may not be the best word here, the team also struggled with last-minute changes as well. Initially, they had considered using the Nintendo 64 expansion pack, but dropped the idea right before release. This actually happened so late in development that it caused confusion with some box covers, which were mislabeled as a result. Despite the difficulties, Jet Force Gemini ended up being released for the N64 in late 1999, and what a game it was. We play as Juno, Vela, and their dog Lupus, part of an intergalactic space force called Jet Force Gemini, and are tasked with stopping the evil bug lord Mizar from taking over the galaxy. Our ship is boarded, and we're forced to land and take the fight to Mizar's seemingly infinite bug army. Oh, and by the way, Lupus is a flying dog with a giant gun on his back. Yeah, this was truly a different era of gaming, but the setup is quick, simple, and designed to get you into the action as quickly as possible, which is good because the exploration and world design is what this game truly excels at. It's hard to put into context, but this game felt absolutely massive at the time of release. Imagine a universe sprawling with endless planets, bursting with secrets hidden in every nook and cranny. Worlds were teeming with diverse landscapes and overflowing with weapons just begging to be used. And just then, when you think you've discovered everything, you'll be backtracking with one of the other characters, find a secret passage under some water that then leads to an entirely new planet. I mean, this was incredible at the time. Each of the characters were facing different routes and had different abilities which could be used in exploration. And this freedom was just so groundbreaking because there was always this feeling that there was something more to discover. Now, as far as gameplay, most of the focus here is just on good old running and gunning, and they definitely did not skimp out on the guns here. There are unnecessary but great additions to the weapon lineup like fish food, and also extremely imaginative and very necessary ones like a tri-rocket launcher. Yeah, as in 3 rockets at once. The guns are just so satisfying to use, and this really helped with the over-the-top use of bug gore. I mean, you can literally just explode and decapitate these poor bugs, and it's kind of amazing that this had a T rating. And all this sounds well and fun, but mess around with this game and it will humble you real quick. It's not easy and does not hold your hand, and it's not just combat. One of the major challenges is just navigating. There's no objective markers telling you where you need to go or what to pick up, and these levels can be absolutely sprawling and extremely confusing. For the kids that manage to beat this game without a guide, well, hats off to you. Now, the only thing that beats blasting apart ants with a tri-rocket launcher is blasting them apart while some of the most epic and moving music you can imagine plays in the background. I cannot stress how exceptional the soundtrack is, and you could argue it's some of the best on the N64, which is no small feat. Not just the music either, the sound effects from the tribals to the satisfying splat of an exploding bug. And well, the machine gun sound is just a thing of pure beauty. I mean, even the character selector screen theme is just great, and it all serves to elevate this game from a platformer with guns to an epic space adventure of mythical proportions. This was from the same people who gave us GoldenEye, so it's unsurprising that there was a multiplayer mode. There was a ton of fun unlockables here, but I don't think it ever really became very popular. There was also a co-op mode as well, but it's kind of a half measure. One of the players is basically tied to this robot that can't really move on its own, and it flies above the player's head. It's kind of bizarre, honestly. On release, Jet Force Gemini met with pretty solid reviews overall. However, apparently it never really sold particularly well. Critically, it was well received, with about an 8 out of 10 being the average, with IGN saying, quote, "It is absolutely epic, incorporating huge, stretching worlds, a seemingly endless amount of enemies, and a virtual scroll of tasks that need to be accomplished, and one of Rare's most ambitious endeavors to date. But as IGN giveth, it also taketh away, with the same review going on to say, quote, "It's perhaps too ambitious for its own good." The game's visuals, while grand, are often hampered by an irritating frame rate that jerks, and meanwhile, game design issues that serve to extend replay value also double as a tedious annoyance. Additionally, control mechanics feel clumsy at times, often transforming what should be a relatively simple task into a lesson of frustration. The sentiments about the controls are shared by many, even to the current day, and you can definitely see why. Aiming feels like pulling teeth, it's doable while stationary, but the frequent switch between this mode and free movement becomes a clunky waltz. And there is, of course, the elephant in the room of the tribals. Now, if you ask someone who played this game on release, I think a good amount of them will say something along the lines of, "Wow, Jet Force Gemini, I love that game, but I could never finish it." Basically, at a certain point in the story, you need to save every tribal across every map. This is difficult not only because there are so many and often hidden in secret areas, but also because these cute little teddy bears have a tendency to get caught in the crossfire and become reduced to a bloody pile of fur. In retrospect, even the developers think this was too harsh, saying, quote, "If I approached this today, I would definitely be more forgiving on the requirement to save all the tribals before being able to progress to the game finale." This feature was actually quite a late addition to the way the game played and was quite a brutal stroke for us to play at such a late stage. I'm not sure we would make the same move again. So even after a few hiccups, it was a fairly successful release, so Rare was probably making plans to make a sequel, right? Well, in a sense. A Game Boy Color port of Jet Force Gemini was in development, but eventually was scrapped. This was interesting though, because at the time, it was one of the only instances of Rare outsourcing a project. Bit Studios took charge of the development and reportedly came quite close to completion. Intended as an isometric shooter, the game would have followed Juno and Lupus on a quest to find Vela after a crash landing. Clearly, these guys should not be trusted with flying a ship. Surprisingly, the game was never officially announced, and it took years for screenshots and videos to even surface. Speculation suggests that the game might have been scrapped because Rare deemed it lacking in quality. However, there are existing videos showcasing a working version of the game, so maybe one day we might get a chance to experience it ourselves. Okay, so no Game Boy game, that's no problem. But the big question is, if it did well critically and sales-wise, why was there never a sequel? Well, a lot of this is purely speculation, but I think we have to get in the minds of Rare at the time. While reception was positive, the game's sales figures during its initial release on N64 didn't quite meet Rare's expectations. While estimates vary, it likely didn't reach the same level of success as other massive Rare titles at the time. This may have made the studio hesitant to invest in a fully fledged sequel. We also should keep in mind that this was at the end of the N64's life cycle, and there was just a shifting focus. Rare was moving on to develop games for other platforms and was putting most of their resources into larger franchises like Star Fox and Perfect Dark Zero. Despite never making a sequel, there was a planned webcomic, which would have apparently been on the Rare website. It would have been set after the events of the game, and the team would have been sent on another rescue mission. There were a few pages done on the project, but this one was also shelved indefinitely too. While there is still no direct sequel, there has been a spiritual one in the form of Tamarin. Chameleon Games, a small studio comprised of veterans from Rare's golden era, aimed to reignite the magic with Tamarin. Actually, by all accounts, it kind of seems to be Jet Force Gemini, with direct asset rips, and the first level being almost a one-to-one recreation of Goldwood. You could say that they were almost too faithful to Jet Force, because while there is the good stuff here, like blasting away at ants and exploration, they also shockingly kept the bad stuff, like outdated controls and rescuing the Furbies. It's a decent looking game and actually has music by David Wise, who has worked on a number of Rare titles, but this was done by a very small team, and the direction seems to be, well, confused at times. I think it's safe to say that it still leaves something to be desired. As far as a remaster, there's been nothing on the radar. However, extremely recently, as in December of 2023, there was rather surprisingly a re-release on the Nintendo Switch. Unfortunately, the widescreen mode didn't properly scale when it was initially dropped on release, but hey, I'm just happy that something has been done with it after all these years, and who knows, maybe with this new release, there'll be an upswelling of appreciation and something more will be done with the franchise. With sprawling worlds begging for exploration, a host of ants ripe for blasting, and a dose of Rare's quirky charm, Jet Force Gemini is kind of a love letter to the pioneering spirit of 90s gaming, even with its rough edges. The labyrinth levels, the unforgiving tribals, the occasional wonky controls, it still does what it does very well. Although the controls do make it difficult to go back, the worlds are huge, the exploration is top-notch, and the music is terrific. So what happened to Jet Force? Over the years, its legacy endured, and the discussions about its potential sequel or remaster have continued. With the recent re-release on the Nintendo Switch in 2023, there's been a bit of a spark of renewed interest. Whether this resurgence will lead to further appreciation and perhaps a remaster remains uncertain, but the game's unique charm and challenges continue to resonate with those who fondly remember that special era of Nintendo 64 gaming. But I'm curious, what do you guys think? Would you be happy with a sequel or remaster, or do you think we should just leave it alone? Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all the support as I try to get this channel off the grounds. If you want to do more to support me, please check out my Patreon in the description below. And as always, if you ever have any suggestions about what you want me to cover next, please just let me know in the comments below. I'm always trying to look for new ideas. Thanks so much. I'll see you guys next time.